Good morning. Taylor Hemness here from 41 Action News with another edition of Faith in KC. Glad to see you again. It's been about a month or so since the last episode. I'm taking the opportunity to sit outside the 41 Action News station here, not far off the plaza today, to record this because it's a beautiful morning as I sit here. It's not 100 degrees just yet. It's not raining, so why not sit outside for a little while? This episode today is going to be one of the prime examples of why we started this series, because today we're talking about Buddhism. My guest today is Lama Matt Rice from the Refuge Buddhist Center here in Kansas City, Missouri. If this is your first episode, welcome. If not, welcome back. The primary thought process behind this episode, this series, I love all the people walking dogs around me right now. Behind this series, when we started last year, was that there was a return in many instances for people to a faith setting, or a beginning of a faith journey for a lot of people because of the pandemic. A lot of people's faith journeys that they'd been on all their lives were changed dramatically by some of the restrictions from COVID-19. And because of that, we wanted a chance to talk to people about it. We don't talk about religion a lot on local news, and we wanted an opportunity to do so. And it started with really learning more about faith communities here in town. And I wanted to talk to as many different ones as we can. I don't mean for these to be lectures or anything like that, or homework to learn more about a faith that you don't maybe identify with or don't know anything about. But I just like learning about new things. I'm a person of faith. I like learning about other faiths so I can speak intelligently about them and ask people about what they believe. It's a core part of who we are as people, about hearing what our faith or faiths look like. So today is another episode like that. It's an opportunity to talk about a religion that I don't know anything about, that you may not know anything about, but just to answer some questions. I'm looking forward to that today. I enjoyed my conversation with Matt, and I hope you will too. One programming note on this. Typically, if you've seen these before, I don't like to edit these in any way, for better or worse in some cases. I like to just have a conversation. I don't write down any questions with the people I speak to. It's just a dialogue. And so I like it to be kind of unedited. But this week, Matt was having some issues with his Zoom recording. So there will be some instances of editing here, but it's just so I can take out those bits where my microphone was not working on his end intermittently throughout the conversation. So if you see those bumps, now if you hear this on the podcast version, you won't see that. But if you see this as you're watching, that's all the editing that's been done, is to take out those little moments. As I mentioned, you can watch this here on Facebook on kshb.com. You can find it in podcast format if you'd rather just listen to it, maybe as you're driving. 41 Files is what you can search for. That'll be the latest episode there. But my thanks to Lama Matt. If you have questions for me, as always, you can reach out on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. You can email me at taylor.hemness@kshb.com and let me know who I should speak to next or what faith should be represented next. And please, by all means, watch previous episodes if you haven't already. These are going to be coming out once a month now. Enjoy. So my guest today on Faith in KC is Lama Matt Rice from the Refuge Buddhist Center in KC Mo. Lama Matt, thank you for taking some time out of your schedule and hanging out with me today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Let me start with this just because, and as I told Matt before we started recording today, and I'm sure is the case for a lot of the people who will watch this, I don't know anything about Buddhism. And that's one of the big reasons I wanted to chat with you and just to learn more about it. So let's start with that title, the Lama Matt Rice. What does Lama mean? What does that title refer?
Yeah, so I have that title, Lama, as the spiritual director of the Refuge Buddhist Center. Lama usually is given to teachers, people who are teaching Buddhism to our communities. And so that's the reason why I have that particular title. There's also other titles, or it can be seen as other titles like Guru, if you're looking at kind of more the Indian traditions. But in Tibetan Buddhism, which is our form of Buddhism at the Refuge Center, it is Lama.
How long have you been in that role?
So I've been the spiritual director for the Refuge Buddhist Center for about 5 years now. I've been a member of the Refuge Buddhist Center for about 20 years.
28, did you say, or just 20?
20 years.
20 years.
Yep.
You look a little bit older than 20, no offense. Tell me about how you came to become a Buddhist and became to the faith.
Yeah, sure. Well, my family's spiritual tradition is Southern Baptist, and when I was raised in that church as a child, probably my teenage years, I started having a lot of questions, kind of felt disillusioned by the church, so kind of dropped out, and was really non-religious, spiritual, but didn't really practice a religion until about my 20s, and then I started to investigate different religions, and this was probably in the 90s, late 90s, and utilizing this thing, the internet that everybody was talking about, and
Right.
It was kind of nice because I was able to be introduced to different religions in a very kind of passive way. I got to explore a little bit, and there was just something about Buddhism that really spoke to me, and that was in Buddhism, our kind of core teaching is what's known as the Four Noble Truths. And this is what the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, discovered about 2,500 years ago when he was living in India. And that is our world is really characterized by suffering, is what is the English translation. But it's more of like dissatisfaction, uneasiness, stress. And that really spoke to me because, I was at a good point in my life, but there was always this kind of undercurrent of just not being really satisfied, wanting more, always kind of chasing after something that I could never get, or I was getting things that, I didn't like. So I was trying to, kind of pushing things away. And what the Buddha said is that, there's a cause for this, which is just not knowing the way the world really is. We think we know. We try to project our own reality onto our world around us, and it's just not quite right. And so we're always going to be dissatisfied with the outcome. And he then gave a teaching saying that this could be resolved by developing wisdom and or ethics, and really finding a balance in your life. And I think that was what spoke to me, is just finding this balance and just living or trying to live the way the world really is, trying to develop wisdom to recognize the causes or the things that are causing me suffering. And that's what spoke to me. And from then on, I kind of, I really threw myself into studying Buddhism, developing like a meditation practice and ethical discipline. And from that, I developed and grew as a Buddhist practitioner. And then when our founder, Lama Chuck Stanford, retired, I was one of the ones that was looked at as taking over the Remay Center, and our board of directors decided that, and now that's my role as the spiritual director.
If viewers are new to Faith in KC, I always like to make clear that this series is not about endorsing or condemning any faith. This is really about, we looked at it as an educational standpoint of more people potentially were coming to or coming back to faith during the pandemic, especially when we had the weight of the world, it felt like, on all of our shoulders. And so this is an opportunity to look at different faiths. And so I want to make sure that's clear. If this is your first episode, I'm not going to be telling you, and Lama Matt's not going to be telling you should go out and become Buddhist. This is just to learn more about Buddhism itself. I'm curious, and Lama Matt and I have never met. Matt, I was raised Church of Christ. I still attend the Church of Christ. I'm curious about, you mentioned that you were raised Southern Baptist. How did that go over whenever you not only put that down, but then a few years later decided to pick up something that is very not Southern Baptist?
Well, I mean, my immediate family were supportive of my journey, and I would say, extended family are, not really sure what to think of me sometimes.
Right.
But one of the things that, my immediate family, like my parents, really stressed was, this journey for yourself, to really find your own way. And I'm sure there's aspects of, the thought, like, they would have liked me to have stayed with the Southern Baptist faith. But, one of the interesting things about religion and what I have found with Buddhism is that, Buddhism doesn't claim ownership of this natural truth that they're trying to get you to become enlightened with. All religions point to this. All religions, whether it's Southern Baptist, Church of Christ, whether you're Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, it doesn't matter. They're all pointing to something. And I think that's one of the things I absolutely love, especially in Kansas City, is there's this really strong kind of interfaith dialogue that's going on right now in the city. And when different organizations like yourself do these faith series, we're tapping into that a little bit. We're exploring different faith traditions, and what we're doing is we're actually seeing something reflected in other traditions that is our own, and actually that strengthens our own faith. His Holiness the Dalai Lama one time said, "I'm not here to convert you to be a Buddhist. I want you to be whatever you are and just be a better that." So if your faith tradition is Church of Christ or Southern Baptist, if there's something that resonates with you from Buddhism or Islam or Judaism or one of the other faith traditions that speaks to you, that reinforces your own core belief system, that's wonderful. And you can start to find these dialogues and these connections with other people and see your own self interconnected with the community around you.
You mentioned at one point when you were starting to lean back towards looking for something and you were exploring different faiths and that kind of thing. The only thing I could equate that to, as you mentioned that, is moving from one city to another and not changing my faith necessarily, but looking for a new place to worship and church hopping a little bit from going, whether I was, and most of my adult life, I've been married or in a serious relationship with my future wife. And so a lot of that we did together, and we would go to one place and she would say, "Nope, we're not going back there." Or, that kind of thing. The first time that you set foot into a Buddhist setting, and you'd done some research on your own. Tell me about that first time where you kind of walked into, and forgive me, is it a Buddhist center? Is it a temple? What's the correct terminology?
Yeah, so there are some that are Buddhist centers. They're kind of more westernized institutions that are more for learning and usually offer just meditation.
Okay.
When you're getting into kind of the aspects of temples, those are usually related more with communities that are coming out of Asia, Southeast Asia, like the Thai or the Lao community, that they're temples that they go to and they practice and meditate and make offerings. So it's center or temple, it's kind of synonymous. One of the things that when I first started looking into Buddhism, I really also looked at various forms of Buddhism. Buddhism is very diverse, just like Christianity. There's
Sure.
all these different, denominations and sects of Christianity, just like there is in Buddhism. And when I started looking, I was looking at, like Vietnamese Buddhism, and, like Chinese Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, and a lot of the temples that are like the Vietnamese temple, their language of choice is Vietnamese, which I don't speak. And so it could be difficult to kind of interact. And so one of the things that we have here in Kansas City are Western English speaking Dharma centers. And so there's the Rimei Center is one of the main ones. And then there's also like Temple Buddhist Center that's over at Unity Temple on the Plaza. And I went to both of them and kind of explored what they were offering. And the Rimei Center at the time really just connected with me. Just something about the environment really and the Lama Chuck and the community there really just spoke to me. And so that's the reason why I stayed.
Was it pretty quick? Was it a pretty quick click for you? And obviously, like you said, you were in a space of looking around and trying to learn something about yourself and what you're looking for. Was it a pretty quick, yeah, I think this is what I'm looking for?
Yes, it really was. I would say it probably took a year or so of just exploring. And again, it was just, and you kind of mentioned it yourself. You go to a church, especially if you're looking for a new church, and you're just like, yeah, this is it, or
right.
No, it's not. You just kind of have that immediate thing. And that's the great thing about, faith communities is there's different ones for folks. Some are more liberal, some are more conservative, some are more progressive. So it really can just be, that community speaking to the person who's looking for a home.
I want to ask you about the kind of ins and outs a little bit of worship, so to speak, of being a practicing Buddhist, because I think most people are familiar with, say, the Christian style of worship, the Sunday mornings, the Wednesday nights, that kind of thing. Mass, going to mass if you're Catholic, whatever that may be. What does being a practicing Buddhist look like in that regard, as far as times that you're gathering with other members of, or other people that worship the same way or believe the same thing? What does that look like, as far as just a Monday through Friday kind of, here's how I practice Buddhism?
Thank you for the question. And I'm going to speak very specific to the Rimé Center, because that's most of my experience. Sure. Every temple or Dharma center is a little different. Most of the time for Buddhist practitioners, it is a little bit of chanting at the beginning, doing some like opening prayers, and then meditation, and then usually a closing or a dedication prayer. Most Buddhist temples and Dharma centers, you're going to be sitting on the floor on a mat, like a cushion.
Okay.
There are chairs, of course, because a lot of times people, may not be able to sit on the floor. So there's chairs as well too. But the majority, you'll be sitting cross-legged on a cushion, and you'll do prayers. Usually, the first prayers that we do are we call Refuge Prayer. So it's kind of a prayer that we say to remind us of why we're Buddhists. So we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And then there's some usually other opening prayers, maybe some prayers for aspiration of developing compassion or wisdom, and then meditation. And then the dedication prayers are really just a way for us to say, we've done some good deeds, we've done some good merit, and we're dedicating that to. We don't want to hold on to it. We want to give it away to everyone, so that everyone shares in our efforts. Specifically at the Rimé Center, one of the things that I found was kind of smart on our founder Lama Chuck's part, was he created our Sunday service to reflect kind of a more Christian service. So we come in, we do some opening prayers, there's some meditation, there's singing, usually with like mantras, and then there's almost like a homily or a talk at the end, and then we do our closing prayers, almost like a benediction type.
So it feels like a Western Christian service.
Yeah, it's really nice for people who might be coming from a Christian background. It just feels a little more familiar than if you were just to say, here, we're going to meditate.
Yeah. So how often are you gathering with other practicing Buddhists? Is it a couple of times a week? How often does that happen?
It's really up to the person who wants to practice, the practitioner. We offer a Sunday service, usually from 10:30 till noon. We call that our Sunday service. So again, for people who are coming to our Dharma Center that may have a Christian background, it will feel familiar, like going to church on Sunday. We also have a Wednesday meditation where people come in, just quick opening prayers, meditation, and closing prayers. And then we also offer meditations through Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So pretty much throughout the week, usually in the evenings on the weekdays. And so sometimes people come just for the Sunday service. Sometimes people come more for Wednesday, depending on their work schedules. But I would say probably our main practice that most people attend is our Sunday service.
How common are you in a Buddhist situation where you were raised in a more traditional, I should say, and I don't mean that in an offensive way, but a Christian standpoint, and then came to Buddhism later on in life? How common is that for people that you know and practice with?
Yeah, so for the Rimé Center, we're mainly a convert or people who are spiritual seekers. It really is kind of divided a little bit is, if you are Vietnamese, you're going to be going to the Vietnamese temple. You were probably raised in the Vietnamese temple or in the Vietnamese Buddhist faith. The Remei Center and the Temple Buddhist Center, which are more kind of Western English-speaking Dharma centers, most of us are coming from a different faith tradition, or may still be holding on or consider ourselves of that particular faith tradition and Buddhist. Again, sometimes people see Buddhism as more philosophical, working with kind of, again, the laws and kind of natural truth, and not so much religious. And so they may still see themselves as Christian, but also Buddhist. And so you have just a mix of folks. But I would say at the English-speaking Dharma centers, a lot of people are going to have a similar story like myself, that were raised in one faith tradition, fell away from it, and are connecting with Buddhism at the moment.
So a lot of religions, most religions maybe, are not only classified by how they worship and how they gather and that kind of thing, but also their interaction with other people. How does Buddhism define the way you mentioned good works earlier, whenever you want to give those away specifically? Like, how does Buddhism define and encourage, for lack of a better word, your involvement with other people and your interactions with other people?
Yeah. Buddhism, there is a strong focus with several different Buddhist faith traditions of engaging others, and we call it the way of a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is a being who's engaged in compassionate action for the working for the benefit of other sentient beings. And this ideal manifested, or the way we try to engender it, is really to engage our communities in a way that benefits others. So sometimes you'll see that as outreaches into the community. So like at the Remei Center, we have a prison outreach where we have volunteers or our members who go into prisons and do programs like meditations and stuff like that for prisoners. You'll also see the Remei Center, we have a homeless outreach where we try to just take food out into the community to just, and it's usually just like grocery items for people who are living on the streets in need. But we have a Tibetan refugee program. So when Tibetans have come out of Tibet, they become refugees in India. And so we try to match people who can help sponsor them, send money over to help them meet their needs until they can get on their feet. And another outreach that we try to do is just interfaith work, reaching out to other members of the community, faith community, to really open dialogue so there's not a lot of mistrust, and to develop stronger bonds amongst the faith community. So I would say that that's an example. A lot of people embody that differently. They may see the job that they do, like maybe if they're a social worker, they see that as part of their engagement of their faith tradition to help other people. As just one example.
So in Christianity, in my faith tradition, it's a biblical commandment to care for, orphans and widows, for one example. What is the reason, the push behind a Buddhist decision or desire to do something good for someone else?
Yeah, it's that ideal, that bodhisattva, the bodhisattva, that enlightened being, or that someone who's working for the benefit of others is put down in our scriptures as a model for us to attain, as kind of ethical discipline, practicing generosity, patience, perseverance. And so the interesting thing I have found with, these ideals of engaging with others is also there's an aspect of not seeking reward from it. Sometimes when we want to be generous, we expect praise, or we expect some kind of, feedback cycle and in Buddhism, we try not to have that. We try to like for generosity, we try to give just so that whoever is in need is benefited. and not really worry about whether people think we're generous or upstanding citizens. So a lot of times people do it in more of a I don't know, kind of I'm not sure the word I'm thinking of right now, but they try to do it in a way where it's behind the scenes, so that people aren't like, oh, isn't Lama Matt such a wonderful, generous person?
Sure.
As a Buddhist, that would make us feel uncomfortable.
Okay. Tell me about the Buddhist community in Kansas City. What's it like in KC for people who practice Buddhism?
Yeah, so I mean, it really is diverse. Again, it would be like trying to say, what's the Christian community like in Kansas City? I mean, there's a lot of folks who see themselves as Buddhist, as like that's their family. They're Buddhist. They may not be engaging in Buddhism quite as intellectually or through study. Maybe they go to the temple, make offerings, maybe do some meditation at home. Others see Buddhism as more of like intellectual study. So they get into the philosophical aspects of Buddhism and see it the more educational side of it. And depending on the community, it can really look different. Again, if you come to the Refuge Buddhist Center, it's going to look. It comes out of the Tibetan tradition, so it has a lot of the flavor, the cultural flavor of Tibetan Buddhism. Like you can see the shrine behind me. This shrine would look different probably if I was practicing more the Vietnamese style of Buddhism. So, if you go to and I would encourage people who might be interested in learning more about Buddhism, explore the different communities. Because if anything, you're going to at least be making connections with people who you probably wouldn't have had a connection with in the past. So it can only really benefit you. And that, again, that's why I find like interfaith dialogues with communities, when churches are doing classes on different faith communities, a lot of times they'll have their folks go to those churches, synagogues, temples, so they have that experience. And I would encourage, people who are watching this today, if they're interested, to just go to one of the spiritual communities, whether it's a Western Dharma center like the Refuge Buddhist Center or the Temple Buddhist Center, or you want to go to one of the more the temples that come out of Asia, like the Vietnamese temple or the Laos temple. It really is a diverse community out there.
Well, that's interesting to me because I was not aware of the diversity in that. Yeah. So tell me about the shrine behind you. You mentioned it there. Like, is that something that every practicing Buddhist would have in their own home? Is that something you've built? Tell me about the purpose and design of a shrine for a Buddhist.
Yeah, so most Buddhists will probably have some representation of our article or our faith. Usually it's going to be an image of a Buddha. So there's the statue that's just kind of right over my shoulder is a Buddha statue. You may also have some scriptures, so like books. So you actually, fortunately, I collect books, and so I have the Dharma books, the scriptures behind me, commentaries, and other things. And so it really is one of those things. We don't see the statue as like we're worshiping that statue. It's really more a reflection of the teacher. It would be for like if I was Christian to have an image of Jesus. Not, I could say, well, I'm worshiping Jesus, but also seeing Jesus as that teacher and seeing his image, reminding me I should live my life according to that, which I think most Christians strive to do. And so for me, as a Buddhist, I see an image of the Buddha not as a thing like I am worshiping like a deity or a god, but as a representation of the idea of what that historical teacher tried to teach us. And then when we have these different forms, then as a Buddhist, a lot of times we're making offerings. So we're practicing generosity. And so we may light a candle, we may light incense, maybe offer like a little bit of food, like some fruit or something like that. But it's just a way for us to engage our practice with an image in front of us. Some people have very elaborate shrines in their home, like what you see behind me. Some people have a very simple, maybe just an image, like a picture of a Buddha on a wall or something like that. But we really see these images as sacred, and because they're pointing to that kind of sacredness in the world, that truth that the Buddha taught so many thousands of years ago. And so they're reminders. And so we try to treat them with as much respect as possible, and to develop that as a practitioner. Shrines can be important. Some Buddhists don't have shrines at all in their homes, and that's okay too.
So just to clarify, because you made that comparison there, like if Christianity had an image of Jesus or of a cross up, mm-hmm. Christ is someone that is my teacher as a Christian, mm-hmm. but is also someone that I worship. Yep. Is that's different for, you're saying that's different for Buddha? Like Buddha is not the person that Buddhists worship. It's the teachings that you're using to follow. Is that fair?
Right. So the important aspect is the teaching. If we were to put, if you had to place importance on either the image of the Buddha or the scripture, the truth, the teachings of the Buddha, we put emphasis on the scriptures, the truth itself, because that's what the Buddha taught. I would say the best way maybe for your listeners to think about the Buddha, that might make sense to them, is think of Jesus without the deification. If Jesus was just a rabbi who taught a truth that people could follow, that would probably be closer to what we think of historical Shakyamuni Buddha. There's also the aspect of a Buddha as a manifestation of that truth, of that enlightenment that the historical Buddha discovered, that freedom from suffering, that stress, that peace that he discovered. That can also be seen as an ideal, and that gives us more of kind of an abstract manifestation of Buddha, because Buddha just means awakened. That's all it means. So Shakyamuni Buddha was, you can translate that or give an understanding of sage of the Shakyas. So Shakya was the people, Muni sage, and then Buddha the awakened one. So it's more of a title for that particular person. But Buddha can also be the goal that we as Buddhists are trying to achieve, that liberation that we're trying to. So we could see that manifestation also in that image. But I would say for your listeners, the historical Buddha, really do think of it like Jesus without the deification. And that would probably give you a pretty good idea of how to see that image.
No, that's helpful to me. That makes sense. So that really helps me out. So I want to ask you about, because I could take all day. This is interesting to me. I could pick your brain all day, but I don't want to take up all your time. But something you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation was almost an awareness of suffering for Buddhists and people who practice Buddhism. I want to ask you about the last year, because there's been a whole lot of suffering over the course of the last year, whether it be COVID, obviously, the pandemic, social injustices that people have responded to in a whole new way. What has that, not awareness, but that level of suffering being present on an almost daily basis been like for Buddhists like yourself? Does it inform or change what you're doing? Do you consider yourself even more sensitive to it? Like when you're aware of that kind of awfulness potentially around you all the time, as a Buddhist, what does that mean and do for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think especially with I'll speak first about the pandemic. I think as Buddhists, one of the teachings that kind of informs our core beliefs is this notion of impermanence, that things aren't fixed, that things end. This also relates with relationships breaking up, also people dying, so dealing with death. With the pandemic, it's been interesting because it's been a 14, 15-month lesson of impermanence, that we had to face the impermanence of having a stable job, we then had to face the impermanence of not being able to see our friends and relatives, have that separation, facing the impermanence of maybe friends and loved ones passing away due to succumbing to complications with COVID.
Yeah.
As Buddhists, we take that as a lesson, and we try not to push it away. We try not to say, this is too tough, I'm pushing it away. Instead, we try to make space for it, to have a little introspection of what is our mind, how is our mind reacting to this impermanence, and if we're upset, not to try to repress being upset, but just to work with that, to have a little mindfulness, to deal with that, and to understand that sometimes we're outside of our ability to deal with that, and we need to address it with, maybe therapy or counseling or something like that, and try not to push it away with distraction, whether that's entertainment, could be distractions like maybe turning to alcohol or drugs, or something that could be harmful to us. And so I think we deal with it as that lesson of impermanence, and to try to just take it one moment at a time, not worry about too much of the future or the past, but just try to find ourselves in the present moment as we come to terms with that. The social injustice, I think, is something that has been in the American consciousness for hundreds of years. And I think the benefit I have found with Buddhism is it allows me, again, that introspective work to say, there's a lot of injustice in the world. Can I look at my own mind and my behavior, and am I contributing to that injustice, and maybe mindfully or unmindfully, and really root out those seeds of harm that are in my own mind, so that I can really benefit the community at large. If I really want to stand up for racial justice, then I need to root out any causes that I might be holding on unconsciously that might harm folks in the Black and brown indigenous community, the BIPOC community. I need to work on, it's a work that I have to do. That also means that I can still stand up and join the community, but do it in a mindful way. Use that energy not to harm, but to really kind of mobilize myself to want to change the world around me. Right now we're in Pride Month, so same thing. I'm going to root out anything that it might be in my mind preventing me from connecting with folks in the LGBTQ community. An example of that would be respecting people wanting to use, different pronouns than what I might be comfortable with, or being mindful of when I'm in a situation and I maybe I see someone who's trans and I feel uncomfortable with that, not to lash out, but to look at that and just sit with that discomfort and say, why am I uncomfortable with that? What is, and root that out so that I can really truly see that person as the person, and open my, and I think what Buddhism really teaches us to do is open our hearts and minds to the community, and just to want people to be happy and not to suffer. We talk about in Buddhism developing loving compassion, or loving kindness and compassion. And we want to spread that out. We want to have a loving, compassionate heart and mind to all people in our community, and not to leave anyone out, even those that we dislike. We try to work towards that as well. And I think that's a powerful lesson, or a method that Buddhism teaches, that all faith traditions have, but Buddhism, I have found Buddhism really puts a lot of emphasis on that. And having love and compassion for yourself too, to sit there and work with your own woundedness, and to be brave about it, and not to, again, Buddhism teaches we try things that that cause us discomfort, we try to push away. So don't push that away. Sit with it, work with it. Things that we like and cause us happiness, we try to grasp to, And Buddhism says, let that go as well. Just try to be mindful and present in the moment and find a balance in your life. And I think that's during this pandemic and the social unrest that we've had, I have found a lot of wisdom in our tradition for navigating and dealing with some of these issues.
That's interesting. I said at one point earlier, I feel bad sometimes when I record these episodes about comparing a religion or a faith that I'm exploring too often to mine, but that's all I've got to compare it to. But it struck me as you were describing that. I wondered how often you have conversations like this with someone who's not a Buddhist, because members of my faith tradition are encouraged to evangelize a little bit, and on those rare occasions where we meet someone who's not familiar with our faith tradition, we're supposed to share it and tell more about why we believe what we believe, that kind of thing. I'm curious, how often do you get a chance to speak to a non-Buddhist about what you're telling me about? Because I find it fascinating. How often do you get this opportunity to talk to someone outside your faith tradition about what you believe?
Yeah, well, just because of my role, a lot. Just because we do like introductory classes to Buddhism, so we get a lot of people who are spiritual seekers, who may just want to know more about Buddhism, who come to this. I get invited to a lot of other faith communities to kind of share and have that interfaith dialogue with people who may not be familiar with Buddhism. I would say Buddhism really strives to not try to convert people, and we see that even in the historical Buddha's life. He would travel throughout India and he would just be meditating, and people would walk up to him and ask him a question, and then he would answer it. It wasn't like he was trying to go around making, people followers of his faith tradition. And so I see that reflected in my own experience, that when I have conversations with people in Kansas City like yourself and others, I'm not interested in you becoming a Buddhist. I'm interested in you just being a better person in general. And if sharing our faith traditions with each other inspires us to be a better person of our faith tradition, then that's a success. I actually gain a lot from other faith traditions, learning about different traditions out there that inform my own faith tradition. Christianity is you mentioned earlier, Christianity has such a great job of faith in action. Your faith through deeds. One of the things I love about another example I could share is with the Sikh faith. They have this practice called Langar, which is they offer a meal. And when I have experienced this, it's this meal that they offer freely to anybody who comes into their practice space. And you're sitting, there's no like, I'm better than you are. Everybody's just sitting together as a community being served. And there's this communal offering that's happening that, I think of this is an ideal form of generosity, to give without any expectation of return, that you're giving food, which I think we all can connect with, to those who need food at that moment in time. And to me, I find these dialogues can really help us inform and just be better, whatever faith tradition that we are.
Well, I like I said, I could pick your brain all day, because I think this has been really, really beneficial for me. And I think most people, my experience with this has been most people who are watching these episodes are already of one faith tradition. But if there's someone who's watching this that says they'd like to come and learn more about Rime and about Buddhism, potentially, what's a good way for them to come? What's a good time? What if I want to watch this episode and say I'd like to go talk to this guy or learn more about what he's describing? What's the directive there?
Yeah, so if people are interested in learning more about Buddhism, I would just encourage them to learn more about it. There's a lot of resources on the internet nowadays. A lot of great, more scholarly articles also, if that's their interest. if they want to find out more about the Remade Buddhist Center, I would just invite them to come to our website, which is www.remacenter. That's RIMECENTER, all one word, remacenter.org. And we are coming out of the pandemic. We're beginning to meet in person again. So check our website, because it's kind of every day is a changing development as far as meeting and how we're meeting and things like that. So definitely go to our website. And from our website, there's also a link where they can contact me and send me an email, and I'll be happy to chat with folks, whether in person or through email. So.
Well, Lama Matt, I can't thank you enough. This has been really interesting for me and answered a lot of questions for me. I know that a couple of my coworkers, I told them that I was having this conversation today, and they were like, "Oh, that's going to be really interesting," because none of us knew a whole lot about Buddhism. I know that we didn't by any means cover Buddhism today, but it was eye-opening for me and taught me a lot. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Taylor.